Mage 40K, Episode 1, Rats in the Golden Basement. Life was good. We were rich. We were powerful. We did whatever the hell we wanted, and reality had better get in line or get out of our way. Because we were mages. In fact, we were a coven of extremely powerful mages, known informally as the Iron Goldfish, who had bested the avatar of human greed, the mouse, taken his empire for ourselves, and ascended to the peak of our magical domains. Everything was going great, right up until it wasn't. While one of our number had been forcibly recruited to a different part of the multiverse for her ability with exotic languages, most of us spent our golden years in the far distant future playing role-playing games. By which I mean we magically interfered with different realities and started playing with the lives of people and civilizations we found there. So, basic gamer stuff. Then, one day, while we were all minding our own, and somebody else's, business, reality went all squishy, and suddenly we were in a post-apocalyptic hellscape. We immediately looked at our companion, the time mage Aoi, and started declaring him responsible for whatever the hell had happened. He protested his innocence, but this was, of course, a lie. You see, Aoi had long been the butt of our collective jokes, for a number of reasons. Mostly because he took it in good stride, and was often more lucky in life than the rest of us, so someone had to take him down a couple of pegs. But he had gotten tired of it over the centuries of our retirement, so instead of just going to night class at the local community college or something, he decided to go back in time and tell his younger self to learn a different school of magic. In this case, mind. He always was a charming bastard. Something paradox, something butterfly effect, something, it was all his fault. For his efforts, we were dubbed the idiot that guy. He insisted it came from the phrase, I know a guy who knows a guy, and he was that guy. We said it was from the phrase, don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. Reasonable people can disagree, I suppose. Fortunately, between the rest of us and our various MacGuffins squirreled away in pocket dimensions, we had enough juice to go back and try to solve the problem our usual way. Zany violence. We determined that the ultimate divergence the idiot had caused came to a head in the early decades of the 2000s, when a series of political and cultural figures started promoting chaos and disorder. We did our best to stymie this unrest, but had no real effect. Not to say that we advocate political violence in any way. We just advocate teleporting people you don't like into the sun with your magic powers. I mean, our correspondence Mage Welshie did this in the entire state of Pennsylvania after a bad date, and nobody seemed to mind over much. He had been formerly called Handy, but insisted on a call sign with some dignity this time. Considering what he did to Pennsylvania and why, we obliged. Nor did anybody object to the several new craters in suburban Toronto, where rude persons had formerly lived. We were not often at home to restraint and subtlety. Unfortunately, every time we knocked out one of the troublemakers, someone else would pop back up. Then, the original figure would pop back up too, like nothing had happened. This caused us some distress, and we started to get more inventive. About the time we were activating our Rube Goldberg contraption involving Jupiter's moons, the asteroid belt, and an overlarge hamster wheel, our erstwhile companion poked her head through the side of reality and helpfully informed us that we weren't being helpful, and that the problem was something leaking through. This seemed to confirm several of the findings our life mage Weeb had discovered. Specifically, the figures promoting chaos, disorder, and confusion all seemed to be biological mutants of some sort, with the occasional extra limb or weird lack of hair. Or chitin. In hindsight, the chitin and the chaos should have been dead giveaways, especially as we had dealt with multiverse hoppers before. But nobody really wants to admit your planet's being invaded by Tyranids. Nobody who knows anything about it wants to live in a reality where Warhammer 40K is real. The gods couldn't actually be that cruel, could they? Our friend informed us that yes, they could, and she had been working in just such a universe for the past while. Time flows differently across universes, and when magic's involved, don't ask questions. Until she spotted the small but steady flow of gene stealers across the warp and into a reality where they shouldn't have existed. Now she and a few friends needed our help to fix the problem, and save 2 universes into the bargain. To adventure! Horrible, nightmarish adventure! Well, that's simplifying things a bit. We didn't just race off. Most of the party were willing to go, having only heard of the Warhammer universe from a few of us who were true fans. Specifically, Weeb, Bard, and that guy's younger brother, an entropy mage. He isn't named in this story because he hid in a large, well-fortified, heavily armed underground bunker and threatened to shoot, bomb, and hex us if we so much as mentioned his name anywhere in connection with 40K. He actually played the minis and knew what we were getting into. Weeb and Bard, however, were eventually found in their less fortified bunkers, the fools, heavily medicated and convinced to come along. Also, our new mind mage Mills created horrifying visions of Dark Eldar behind the pair and chased them into the portal. Knowing a plot hook when one tore through reality at us, we finally made our way across the realities. After a microsecond-long eternity of our souls being pulled apart and decoratively rearranged, we stepped out of the weirdness and into a light so bright and golden that it hurt our eyes. As we struggled to focus, a gigantic crimson figure with one eye loomed out of the glare. "You see, companion, I told you my mystic might was enough to overcome the barriers surrounding our reality." "Shut the fuck up, horn tits. I'm the one who overcame the boundaries of the multiverse and crossed into this primitive, me-lacking universe." "Oh, and competence helped," he added, gesturing to our friend. "And you remember why I named her Competence, right?" Because she's the only one of you idiots I can trust to tie their own damn shoes, let alone act independently to further my goals. Which brings me to the rest of you. My shoes don't even have laces. They have buckles. Shut the fuck up. Anyway, back to the wizards. Welcome to my universe, and the 41st millennium. It is not the 41st millennium you know, because apparently I can't speak in that one, which is stupid and boring. My universe is much better, and I have brought you in to help fix it. So fix it. There was a stunned silence for a few moments as we processed all of this. Then Weeb, overcoming his awe and fear, shook his head and said, "Wait, you want us to fix an entire universe?" Did I fucking stutter? "No, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. No. Yes. Sorry, Daddy. Sir. And he trailed off as one of the half-naked, glistening custodies leaned over and whispered, sotto voce, "Don't worry about it. That happens to us all the time." So yeah, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, I want you to fix this universe. I have some ideas and some schemes in place, but I need people I can trust to tip the scales and make sure things go according to my plan. I would send my own people, but it took them 10,000 years to install a basic text-to-speech device, and I can't wait that long. My companion, the Captain General, will get you the appropriate contacts. But you may have noticed that you are feeling less powerful, because this is a new campaign. That's right, I can see through the fourth wall, because I am the mother-blooping Emperor. And because this is a strange universe to you. So to get you adjusted, let's start with a simple quest that you will probably be used to. Go kill some rats in my basement. Any questions? No? Good. Now get the fuck out. We tried to protest, or ask some questions, or just deal with the lunacy of the situation, but a trio of large, semi-nude, oiled men escorted us politely but very firmly from the Imperial presence. We were given a set of rebreathers to survive in the gaseous environment, and a few simple slug throwers and basic short swords, as anything too flammable would be a bad idea in a planet-sized sewer. The custodies informed us that the last sewage fire took months to put out and killed thousands of civilians. So a minor inconvenience, but still one to avoid if we could. We took our equipment and followed the custodians to a large, room-sized platform, and began the incredibly long descent into the bowels of the palace complex. Once the air reached a certain thickness, we clanked to a stop and stepped delicately into the tunnels, keeping to the walkways along the walls as best we could. Weeb delayed for a while to try and flirt with the large men, but we turned a corner before they could respond in kind, thankfully. We had been informed that, in our investigations, we were liable to come across mutants, but the biggest issue was to clear out the large rats they had been getting reports of. The custodies were emphatic that there were no orcs on Terra, no matter what anyone said. We were heartily cheered by this news. Nevertheless, we set off down into the warren of passageways, twisting and turning and doing our best to remember our path. The correspondents and mind mages were working overtime to keep things straight, but we managed not to lose our way. We did come across a bunch of mutants, but they didn't really form an issue for us, because someone else had made them all dead, with very clear, and now very dirty, stab wounds spread across the bodies. A discussion was had about whether diplomacy should be tried with anyone we encountered, but Bard reminded everyone that this was 40K, where if genocide wasn't always the answer, it was at least on the list of choices. Our lengthy philosophical debate on the nature of morality when one is in a potentially fictional universe, and a variant one at that, got interrupted when we turned a corner and came face to snout with two large, humanoid rats. Weeb, who had joined us by this point, grabbed Bard, our real-world DM, by the throat and started shaking him like a crying baby, shouting, "Why are there Skaven in 40K, Bard? Why are there Skaven in 40K? I don't know! Let me go so we can kill him and find out!" And we did. Well, to be fair to some of our party, those of us without pre-existing lore-based prejudice did try briefly for peace, but before they could get much of an argument made, there was a squeaky cry of, "Man-things! Kill! Yes, yes!" Oh well, if they wanted to commit messy suicide by mage, who were we to deny them? The horrible, foul-smelling, yes, even in the middle of a sewer they stank, rat creatures advanced on us, their foul blades dripping a green ichor that we prayed was poison and not just extra sewage. Their mistake. A few of us closed to try and fight them hand-to-hand, with some success, before Competence reminded us of her name, and that a bunch of squishy wizards had no business doing anything in melee. So she reached out with her power over the forces of matter, and more specifically with a transmogrification gun focus that she had been working on for some years, swearing up and down to the Mechanicus that it was based on an ancient blueprint from the venerable foundries of Nerf, and turned all of the oxygen in the immediate vicinity of the rats into iron, including the oxygen in their lungs. They probably died pretty quickly, but we couldn't tell because the sudden weight caused them to drop into the muck like a sack of wet. Well, anyway, they were missing, presumed dead, and we had no intention of looking for them. Actually, one of the pair dropped, but apparently the other just got a nice gilding on his insides. But Critical, the entropy probability warper, dislocated his shoulder, causing reality to cringe in horror, and the transformation magic to work more effectively. We caught this one before he hit the muck, and one acid ball later, we had a lovely piece of abstract statuary to present to the Emperor. Someone pointed out that the respiratory system of a humanoid is not exactly proof of Skaven, so we might want to take some intact next time. Alive didn't actually enter into the conversation. As we continued our trek through the sewers, we did our best to look for signs/proof of rat men. Welshie pulled a large wheel of cheese and loudly offered it to any nearby rats. Nothing happened, except that from down a distant corridor, a high-pitched voice called him a racist. There was a small ambush at one point, but Mills did a quick ritual dance and created the image of a giant mousetrap in their minds. It was probably less the mousetrap and more the direct assault with mind magic that did it, but the Skaven fled in squeaking terror. When we found another group standing over some fresh mutant corpses, that guy dealt with them by convincing them we were friendly, mostly by going, "Hey, come on," until we could sneak around and stab them in the back. Some of the enemies we encountered were convinced that the flowing sludge, for a loose definition of flowing, was a fresh spring, and nature took its horrible, horrible course, while others were the subject of Competence's practice at instant sculpting. We did discover that her attempts to encase the rats in solid stone, another setting on her ray gun, only lasted for an hour or so. But it was a moot point to the rats, and did provide us with some lasting proof of their presence so long as we refreshed the spell. Things continued like this for a while, until we decided we were tired of just wandering. Weeb reached out with his life magic to sense where any creatures around us might be. Unfortunately, sewers are often full of life, from bacteria to vermin, the regular kind, thankfully, so there was a lot of mystic noise to parse. Luckily, several of us, including Bard and Critical, had some knowledge of life. It never pays to get typecast. So with their help and a few minutes of rest and meditation, or as much as you can get in the middle of a mountain-sized sewer, we were able to pinpoint some concentrations of larger life forms. As we searched them out, we discovered a few mutant enclaves that we really didn't have the heart, or ingrained racism, to clear out. We shouted a warning about the humanoid rats, and left them to their horrible-smelling business. The only real incident of note on our journey to the center of the shit was when we came into a large room filled with ancient, eldritch machinery being banged on by 3 small, green, humanoid figures. Gretchen. They were too obsessed with the machinery to notice us as we approached, although it was really the sound of the machinery that saved us when a panicking weeb once more throttled Barb and started whisper shouting, "Orcs! Why are there orcs on Terra? Why?" While the 2 stooges were occupied, Competence took careful aim and repeated her instant statue ability, to the great annoyance of the DM. We stepped over the Gretchen sickles and checked the machinery, but with no idea what it did, the best we could say was that most of the damage looked cosmetic, so it was probably fine. Or, at least, not our problem. We knew we were nearing the end of our quest, or at least our patience, when we heard a great deal of squeaking and chittering coming through what must have been a thin wall. Luckily, we heard them before they heard or saw us, and so we were able to make a small hole in the wall to look through. Spotting the half-dozen-strong squad inside, we noted briefly that this universe had not yet learned the folly of allowing mages cover and prep time. We took plenty of time to prepare and really gather our magical mojo. One series of confusing and eclectic rituals later, since we all had different styles, we channeled our energy through Competence, who fired a blast through the hole and into the room. The entire scene appeared frozen in gleaming metal, trapped forever in time. Without warning, a greenish rift opened next to us and a large, ornate metal skeleton stepped out, said, "Call me if you ever want a career making dioramas," handed Competence a business card and vanished. The card read, "Trazen the Infinite." Weird. We enlarged the hole in the wall without too much caution and pushed through to collect our new artworks. This was a slight mistake, as there were additional rooms beyond the one we had encased. As Competence, enjoying her first combat magic after years of research, held up a rat chew and shouted, "Hey everyone, look what I made!" We heard an enraged squeal from further down the adjoining corridor. We looked out to see our new victims, only to duck back into cover, as a blast of strange, unpleasant-looking energy hurtled past us. Once we got a good view, we saw 2 more of the rat men, slightly larger and less filthy-looking than normal, but still basic Skaven, flanking a taller, gray-furred rat with horns spiraling out of its head. Weeb, by this point, had gone from shocked, past deeply concerned, and was full-on freaking out man. The rest of us were too ignorant to be too concerned. Fortunately, as a true fanboy, Weeb was well versed in the litanies of hate, and started chanting it to himself, with special emphasis on purging the unclean, because man, these guys were gross. He buffed himself with life magic, while Bard called in his crazier, more powerful superhero spirits. He figured Deadpool and Superman could probably survive passage through the warp, and the 2 began to wail on the 2 Skaven flunkies. This was going fine until the horned one started wiggling his fingers, shouting, "Yes, yes, kill, kill, rot!" and blasted Weeb with a beam of unpleasant energy. It's hard to force decay a life mage, but it was very unpleasant. While their leader was distracted, however, Mills danced a horrific vision at the rats, and the 2 flunkies soiled themselves. We think. It's hard to tell given the sewage and the general level of filth. This allowed Bard to shoot one, while that guy moved in and swiped at the other rat. He missed its body, but he did sever its tail near the trunk. The Skaven stopped suddenly, gingerly reaching down to grab his tail, and began to cradle it and cry. We were a bit confused, but we decided that the fight was probably out of him, so we all shifted our focus to the magic wielder. Weeb tried to retaliate against the rat wizard for its magical attack, and attempted to steal its life force, but the second he tasted it, for lack of a better word, he threw up a little in his mouth, retreated, and conjured up a bottle of hand sanitizer. Fueled by disgust, Weeb went into his martial stance, pulled back a fist, and visibly charged a magical blast around it, anime style. Discussing things later, our best guess was that what the seer squeaked was something along the lines of, "I fear no man thing, for the great horned rat protects me," because it more or less bared its chest like it intended to tank the magic. And it might have done, if Weeb hadn't instead clamped his hand firmly over the creature's mouth and sent a spark to ignite all the O2 in its lungs. I'm not sure if that should have physically worked, but magic is a bitch. Anyway, you ever see a bottle or can get all the air sucked out of it suddenly and crumple in on itself? You really shouldn't see that happen to a mammal, no matter how vile. And you never forget the sound of a ribcage imploding. We all stared at Weeb for a minute, except the remaining Skaven, which had shuffled off quietly sobbing into the tunnels. We decided that we really didn't want to deal with any more potential rat wizards, and now we had plenty of proof of a problem bigger than we could immediately deal with, especially for a starter quest. So we took the horned rat head and began our trek back towards the lift. Correspondence magic sure is very useful, and we had made enough of a violent splash when we first came through to discourage any inquisitive minds, so we had no trouble getting back. We had collected our assortment of Xeno statuary and dumped them at the feet of the waiting custodies, before heading for the convenient decontamination station on the platform. We refused to bother with the comparatively lowly custodians, insisting that our news would only be appreciated by the Emperor, or perhaps the Captain General. But they started to mope, and threaten violence, so we mentioned the orcs at least. There was some mumbling about second moons or something, but they seemed to take us seriously. As we traveled, we also discovered that paradox existed in this universe. Some of us had figured that since magic and or psychic powers were a thing here, we should be able to use our abilities freely. Apparently, this was only half true, as reality still objected to our shenanigans, just a lot less strenuously. Also, there were procedures in place for this sort of thing. We found this out when little sparks and strange whispers started manifesting around Bard, who had had the poor sense to use his spirit magic in the 40K universe without proper training. We tried to play this off like it wasn't a big deal, or just pretend that we didn't hear it. It was pretty quiet, after all. But the moment one of the custodians heard it, he tackled the mage to the ground, dragged him over to a small fountain, and started giving him a holy water swirly. It was like high school all over again. Except this time it actually had a purpose, as it definitely stopped the sparking and whispering. And Bard admitted he did feel better once he dried out. The rest of us who were feeling slightly paradoxy lightly sprinkled ourselves and had a few prayers said by a chaplain, which seemed to do just as well, albeit less entertainingly. Finally presentable and at the top of the lift, we presented our objet d'art before the throne and informed the Emperor that he had problems. Orcs under the palace. The Captain General looked at us and said, "Oh, not again." "Again? What? Oh, and also Skaven." At this point the Emperor chimed in with, "Yeah, Gary likes to try and sneak in when no one's paying attention." "Gary?" "GHR. Gary. And he's probably more marketable than Slanesh." "Wait, what? Shut up. I'll have a talk with him and tell him to stay in the galactic sewers where his kind belong. Anyway, well done on proving yourself more capable at finding Xenos infiltrators than my supposed superhumans," he said, looking pointedly, or as pointedly as a skeleton can, at the semi-nude custodians, who shuffled their feet. "Now that you have a feel for everything, time to go off and fix stuff. I've given you some inquisitorial credentials. Not full ones, because you still need supervision, but competence has been seconded as an interrogator to some trustworthy folks, and the rest of you can act as her retinue. You can meet them in orbit shortly. Also, take this." And he telekinetically floated a small, laminated card to our party. It read, "I do what I want," and bore the signature, Big E. That should help if you get into any trouble that the scary badge can't get you out of. Your first mission is to deal with the Tau. From what my companion tells me, they are a small bunch of upstarts, so it shouldn't be too hard to convince them to serve the Emperor's greater good. My only condition is that they learn to fight in melee like proper warriors. None of this too good to get stabbed nonsense for my troops." "Or you could just exterminate them all. That would work too," piped the Captain General. "Shut up and get over your weird Xeno girlfriend," said the Emperor, and they quickly devolved into squabbling like an old married couple. We stood there in silence, ignoring them as we all tried to process this new mission, until the Emperor said, "What's the holdup? Get the hell out of here. I have strippers toadies to kink shame." At that, we hurried out before things could get even weirder. Weeb did have the presence of mind to suggest we gather some relics, just as a precaution, and we scrounged up a few holy ashtrays from the handy Imperial gift shop, under the premise that a relic was a relic. A few hours of intra-palace travel and paperwork later, and we were on a shuttle on our way to meet our new boss. And then convert an entire species of hostile Xenos to Imperial service. Yeah, no problems there. On the upside, Bard pointed out that it was a 40K universe, so it would be hard to make things actively worse. The rest of us threw things at him for saying it out loud and jinxing us. End of Chapter 1. Thanks to everybody for listening. This is the first section of a series of games I've been playing with my friends where we play Mage the Ascension, but in 40K. We're having fun, and I think it's funny, so I was going to record them. And just in case anybody gets upset about that's not how it works in the 40K universe, well, it's not the 40K universe. It's a 40K universe. And in fact, it's a text-to-speech-based universe, but forgive me for not being able to do many of the voices all that well. Or at least not I can't do a computer voice. But yeah, hope you enjoy. We'll have more episodes coming out. First ones will probably come out in pretty quick succession, and then I'll be up to present date, and you'll have to wait for us to actually play multiple sessions. But yeah, hope you enjoy. Have a good one. Bye.